we're on day 18 of our B90 challenge. We've made it through the Pentateuch and through Joshua. We're well into Judges. We'll almost finish with Judges today. We'll have a couple chapters to finish it off tomorrow, and then we're into the book of Ruth. I will post the Bible Project video for the overview of the book of Ruth in the Facebook group, and then we'll be right through. Ruth is a short book; it's really just one story, and then we'll be into the book of First Samuel. And First Samuel is where the Bible really just becomes epic. It's where we finally get the kingship, but then, and it's really the story. It's a building. All of this is building into the story of David, who was a type of Christ. He was a predecessor to the Christ, and that's what all of these patriarchs and great men, and even the judges. Even though the judges don't do a very good job of it most of the time, especially as we're going to see today, we're reading stories about, Gideon was funny. That's a funny story. It definitely shows God's sense of humor, and I tried to portray that. I watched that part where I was giggling so much, and it didn't look like it felt. I mean, I really enjoyed the story, but it just came so comical to me. Reading it out loud, I felt like I could see what was happening. These guys, Gideon was a weakling. He was, he was threshing wheat. Now, one thing we don't understand is threshing wheat is supposed to be done on the top of a hill, because the wind, what you're doing is throwing the wheat with the chaff into the air, the hulls of the wheat, and the wind will blow away the fragments of the hulls and stuff of the wheat. So you throw it up and it blows that away, and the seeds fall down. And he was doing this in a wine press, is what it said in there, which would be in the valley. So, but he was doing that so he wouldn't be seen by the enemies. So it just kind of was an illustration of his weakness. And and then when the angel came to him, he said, "Why would you send me? We're the weakest tribe, and I'm the weakest one of the weakest tribes." So he was meek, and that was one of the reasons God wanted this story, wanted it like this. That's where there was too big of an army. He said, "This is all going to be me. I don't even want you to say that you did this." And, that's what happened with him. It's just a funny story. That's how we are in our greatness. If we're great on a part of God, it's a temporary. Apart from God, it's a temporary thing that will not last. But, where did that thing go? There we go. Alrighty, well, let's jump into chapter 8. Is that where we are? Yeah, chapter 8. So we haven't read the rest of Gideon's story. So we get to see how Gideon ultimately fails, and then we're reading a bunch of other judges. We're reading about Samson today, and there's some. I mean, this is some hard reading. Judges was a special time. This goes to prove to me, in my apologetic, we're reading history that no person would write their own. I mean, even though it's true, nobody would write these humiliating details of their own history. That kind of stuff gets glossed over in history. Let's jump right into it. Jump right in 4 minutes later, 5 minutes later. I talk too much sometimes. I'm sorry, guys. I hope you're still hanging with me. I still enjoy it. Chapter 8. Now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, "Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" And they challenged him vigorously. But he answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb to the Midianite leaders into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" At this, the resentment against him subsided. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted, yet keeping up the pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the men of Succoth, "Give me your troops. Give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I'm still pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the officials of Succoth said, Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops? Why should we give bread to your troops?" Verse 7. And Gideon replied, "Just for that, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." From there he went up to Peniel and made the same request of them. Then they answered as the men of Succoth. So he said to the men of Peniel, "When I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with a force of about 15,000 men, all that were left of the armies of the eastern peoples. 120,000 swordsmen had fallen, and Gideon went up by the route of the nomads, east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and attacked the unsuspecting army. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle by the pass of Heres. He called a young man of Succoth and questioned him, and the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 officials of Succoth, the elders of the town. And then Gideon came and said to the men of Succoth, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me by saying, 'Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give you bread for your exhausted men?'" He took the elders of the town and taught the men of Succoth a lesson by punishing them with desert thorns and briars. He also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town. Verse 18. Then God asked, sorry, I was thinking about God. And then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men did you kill at Tabor?" "Men like you," they answered, each one with the bearing of a prince." Gideon replied, "Those were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. As assuredly as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you." Turning to Jether, his oldest son, he said, "Kill them." But Jether did not draw his sword because he was only a boy and was afraid. Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Come, do it yourself. As is the man so is his strength." So Gideon stepped forward and killed them. He took the ornaments off their camels' necks. Verse 22. The Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And he said, "I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." As it was customary of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings, they answered, "We'll be glad to give you them." So they spread them out on a garment, and each of them threw a ring from his plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels, not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Verse 28. Thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites, but did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace 40 years. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went back home to live. He had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age, and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abizarites. Verse 33. No sooner than Gideon had died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal Berith as their god, and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies, on every side. They also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in spite of all the good things he had done for them. Even the judges, man, the heroes are. Chapter 9. Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to his mother's house in Shechem and said to them and all his mother's clan, Ask all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, to have 70 of Jerubbaal's sons rule over you, or just one man? Remember that I am your flesh and blood. When the brothers repeated this to the citizens of Shechem, they were all inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, He is related to us. And they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, and Abimelech used it to hire reckless scoundrels who became his followers. He went to his father's home in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding. Then all the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo gathered beside the great tree at the pillar of Shechem to crown Abimelech king. When Jotham was told about this, he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to them, Listen to me, citizens of Shechem, so that God may listen to you. One day the trees went out to anoint a king for themselves, and they said to the olive tree, Be our king. But the olive tree answered, Should I give up my oil, by which gods and humans are honored, to hold sway over the trees? Verse 10. Next the trees said to the fig tree, Come and be our king. But the fig tree replied, Should I give up my fruits, so good and so sweet, to hold sway over the trees? Verse 12. Then the trees said to the vine, Come and be our king. But the vine answered, Should I give up my wine? With cheers both gods and humans hold sway over the trees. I keep messing that up. Verse 14. Finally, all the trees said to the thorn bush, Come and be our king. The thorn bush said to the trees, If you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon. Verse 16. Have you acted honorably and in good faith by making Abimelech king? Have you been fair to Jerubbaal and his family? Have you treated him as he deserves? Remember that my father fought for you and risked his life to rescue you from the hand of Midian. But today you have revolted against my father's family. You have murdered his 70 sons on a single stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his female slave, king over the citizens of Shechem, because he is related to you. So have you acted honorably and in good faith toward Jerubbaal and his family today? If you have, may Abimelech be your joy, and may you be his too. But if you have not, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and consume Abimelech. Verse 21. Then Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech. Verse 22. After Abimelech had governed Israel 3 years, God stirred up animosity between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem, so that they acted treacherously against Abimelech. God did this in order so that the crime against Jerubbaal's 70 sons, the shedding of their blood, might be avenged on their brother Abimelech and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him murder his brothers. In opposition to him, the citizens of Shechem set men on the hilltops to ambush and rob everyone who passed, and this was reported to Abimelech. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, moved with his clan into Shechem, and the citizens put their confidence in him. After they'd gone out into the fields and gathered the grapes and trodden them, they held a festival in the temple of their god. While they were eating and drinking, they cursed Abimelech. Then Gaal, son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech, and why should we Shechemites be subject to him? Isn't he Jerubbaal's son? Isn't Zebul his deputy? Serve the family of Hamor, Shechem's father. Why should we serve Abimelech? And if only his people were under my command, then I would get rid of him. I would say, Abimelech, call out your whole army." Verse 30. When Zebul, the governor of the city, heard that what Gaal, son of Ebed, said, he was very angry. Under cover he sent messengers to Abimelech, saying, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his clan have come to Shechem and are stirring up the city against you. Now then, during the night you and your men should come and lie in wait in the fields in the morning, and in the morning at sunrise advance against the city. When Gaal and his men come against you, seize the opportunity to attack them. Verse 34. So Abimelech and all his troops set out by night and took up concealed positions near Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, had gone out and was standing at the entrance to the city gate, just as Abimelech and his troops came out from their hiding place. When Gaal saw them, he said to Zebul, "Look, you're coming down from the tops of the look. People are coming down from the tops of the mountains." Zebul replied, "You mistake the shadows of the mountains for men." But Gaal spoke up again. "Look, people are coming down from the central hill, and a company is coming from the direction of the diviner's tree." Then Zebul said to him, "Where's your big talk now? You who said, 'Who is Abimelech that we should be subject to him?' Aren't these the men you ridiculed? Go out and fight them." So Gaal led out the citizens of Shechem and fought Abimelech. Abimelech chased him all the way to the entrance of the gate, and many were killed as they fled. When Abimelech stayed in Arumah, and Zebul drove Gaal and his clan out of Shechem. Verse 42. The next day the people of Shechem went out to the fields, and this was reported to Abimelech. So he took his men and divided them into 3 companies and set an ambush in the fields. When they saw the people coming out of the city, that he rose to attack them. Abimelech and the companies with him rushed forward into a position at the entrance of the city gate, and then 2 companies attacked those in the fields and struck them down. All that day Abimelech pressed his attacks against the city until he had captured it and killed its people. And he then destroyed the city and scattered salt over it. Verse 46. On hearing this, the citizens in the tower of Shechem went into the stronghold of the temple of El-Berith. And when Abimelech heard they had assembled there, he and all his men went up to Mount Zalmon. He took an axe and cut off some branches. When he lifted his shoulders, he ordered the men with him, "Quick, do what you've seen me do." So all the men cut the branches and followed Abimelech, and they piled them up against the stronghold and set it on fire with the people inside. So all the people in the tower of Shechem, about 2,000 men and women, also died. Verse 50. Next, Abimelech went to Thebes and besieged it and captured it. Inside the city, however, was a strong tower, which all the men and women and the people in the city had fled, and they locked themselves in and climbed up upon the tower roof. Abimelech went to the tower and attacked it. But as he approached the entrance to the tower and set it on fire, a woman dropped an upper millstone on his head and cracked his skull. 54. Hurriedly he called his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that they can't say, 'A woman killed me.'" So his servant ran him through, and he died. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they went home. Thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also made the people of Shechem pay for all their wickedness. The curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came on them. Chapter 10. After the time of Abimelech, a man of Issachar named Tola, son of Puah, son of Dodo, rose to save Israel. He lived in Shamir, in the hill country of Ephraim. He led Israel 23 years, and then he died, and he was buried in Shamir. Verse 3. He was followed by Jair of Gilead, who led 22 years, and he had 30 sons who rode 30 donkeys. They controlled 30 towns in Gilead, which to this day are called Havoth Jair. When Jair died, he was buried in Kamon. Verse 6. Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals and the Ashtaroths, and the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, and the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. And because the Israelites forsook the Lord and no longer served him, he became angry with them. He sold them into the hands of the Philistines and the Ammonites, who that year shattered and crushed them. For 18 years they oppressed the Israelites on the east side of the Jordan in Gilead, the land of the Amorites. The Ammonites also crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. Israel was in great distress. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord, "We have sinned against you, forsaking our God and serving the Baals." Verse 11. The Lord replied, "When the Egyptians, the Ammonites, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Maonites oppressed you, and you cried to me for help, did I not save you from their hands? But you have forsaken me and served other gods, so I will no longer save you. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you when you are in trouble." 15. But the Israelites said to the Lord, "We have sinned. Do with us whatever you think is best, but please rescue us now." Then they got rid of the foreign gods among them and served the Lord, and he could bear Israel's misery no longer. When the Ammonites were called to arms and camped in Gilead, the Israelites assembled and camped at Mizpah. The leaders of the people of Gilead said to each other, "Whoever will take the lead in attacking the Ammonites will be head over all who live in Gilead." Chapter 11. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. "You are not going to get any inheritance in our family," they said, "because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a gang of scoundrels gathered around him, and followed him. Verse 4. Sometime later, when the Ammonites were fighting against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. "Come," they said, "be our commander, so we can fight the Ammonites." Jephthah said to them, Didn't you hate me and drive me away from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble?" The elders of Gilead said to him, "Nevertheless, we are turning to you now. Come with us to fight the Ammonites, and you will be the head over all of us who live in Gilead." Verse 9. Jephthah answered, "Suppose you take me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me. Will I really be your head?" The elders of Gilead replied, "The Lord is our witness. We will clearly do as you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And he repeated all his words before the Lord in Mizpah. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the Ammonite king with the question, "What do you have against me, that you have attacked my country?" Verse 13. The king of the Ammonites answered Jephthah's messengers, "When Israel came up out of Egypt, they took away my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok, all the way to the Jordan. Now give it back peaceably." Verse 14. Jephthah sent back messengers to the Ammonite king, saying, "This is what Jephthah says. Israel did not take the land of Moab, or the land of the Ammonites, but when they came up out of Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea, and on to Kadesh. Then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Give us permission to go through your country." But the king of Edom would not listen. They also sent the king of Moab, and he refused, so Israel stayed in Kadesh. Verse 18. Next they traveled through the wilderness, skirted the lands of Edom and Moab, and passed along the eastern side of the country of Moab, and camped on the other side of the Arnon. And they did not enter the territory of Moab, for Arnon was its border. Verse 19. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon, and said to him, "Let us pass through your country to our own place." Sihon, however, did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, and he mustered all his troops and encamped at Jahaz, and fought with Israel. Verse 21. Then the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and his whole army to into Israel's hand, and they defeated him. Israel took over all the land of the Amorites who lived in that country, capturing all of it, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from there from the desert to the Jordan. Verse 23. Now, since the Lord God of Israel has driven the Amorites out before us, before his people, Israel, that is right. What right have you to take it over? Will you not take what your god Chemosh gives you? Likewise, whatever the Lord our God has given us, we will possess. Are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, Did he ever quarrel? Did he ever quarrel with Israel or fight with them? For 300 years, Israel occupied Heshbon, Aroer, the surrounding settlements, and all the towns along the Arnon. Why didn't you retake them during that time? If I have not wronged you, but you are doing wrong by waging war against me. Let the Lord, the judge, decide the disputes this day between the Israelites and the Ammonites. 28. It's pretty cool to have read all that history last week, isn't it? He knows it. So what excuse do they have to be as bad as they are? Okay, I'm sorry, rant. 28. The king of Ammon, however, paid no attention to the message Jephthah sent him. The Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah, and he crossed Gilead and Manasseh, and he passed through Mizpah and Gilead, and from there he advanced on the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Verse 32. Man, that's such a sad thing. I gotta stop. Verse 32. Then Jephthah went over to fight against the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel Kerumim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. 34. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of timbrels? She was only a child, except for her he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh no, my daughter, you have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." Verse 36. "My father," she replied, "you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised. Now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request," she said. "Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry." Verse 38. "You may go," he said. And he let her go for 2 months. She and her friends went to the hills and wept because she would never marry. After 2 months she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she was a virgin. From this comes the Israelite tradition that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. Chapter 12. The Ephraimite forces were called out, and they crossed over to Zephon, and they said to Jephthah, "Why did you go fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you? We're going to burn down your house over your head. Verse 2. Jephthah answered, "I and my people were engaged in a great struggle with the Ammonites, and although I called, you did not save me out of their hands. When I saw that you wouldn't help, I took my life in my hands, and I crossed over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave me the victory over them. Now why have you come up today to fight me?" Verse 4. Jephthah then called together the men of Gilead, and fought against Ephraim. And the Gileadites struck them down because the Ephraimites had said, "You Gileadites are renegades from Ephraim and Manasseh." The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan leading to Ephraim, and whenever a survivor of Ephraim said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead asked him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" And he replied, "No." And they said, "All right, say Shibboleth." And if they said Shibboleth, because they could not pronounce the word correctly, they seized him and killed him and in the fords of the Jordan, 42,000 Ephraimites were killed at that time. That'd be like saying to a Yankee, telling me, "Are you from South Carolina?" Yeah, I'm from South Carolina. Say "oil." I'd say "oil," and they'd kill me. Instead of saying "oil," you got to say "oil" or "oil" instead of "oil." That's exactly it right there. Okay, verse 7. Jephthah led Israel 6 years, and then Jephthah the Gileadites died and was buried in a town in Gilead. Verse 8. After him, Isban of Bethlehem led Israel. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. He gave his daughters away in marriage to those outside the clan. For his sons he brought in 30 young women as wives from outside his clan. Ibzan, that's the right name if I said it wrong before, led Israel 7 years, and then Isban died and was buried in Bethlehem. Verse 11. After him, Elon, the Zebulunite, led Israel 10 years. Then Elon died and was buried in Aijalon in the land of Zebulun. Verse 13. After him, Abdon, son of Hillel, from Parthon, led Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys. He led Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, died and was buried at Pirathon in Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. Chapter 13. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. A certain man of Zorah, named Manoah, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was childless and unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, that you eat, and do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head will never be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Guess who this is? And then the woman went to her husband and told him, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God, very awesome. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name, but he said, 'You will become pregnant and have a son. Now then, drink no wine or other fermented drink, and do not eat anything unclean, because the boy will be a Nazarite of God from the womb until the day of his death." Verse 8. Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I beg you, let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring the boy who is to be born." God heard Manoah, and the angel of the Lord came to the woman while she was out in the field, but her husband Manoah was not with her. The woman hurried to tell her husband, "He's here, the man who appeared to me the other day." Verse 11. Manoah got up and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said, "Are you the man who talked to my wife?" "I am," he said. So Manoah asked him, "When your words are fulfilled, what will be the rule that governs the boy's life and work?" Verse 13. The angel of the Lord answered, "Your wife must do all that I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, nor drink any wine or other fermented drink, nor eat anything unclean. She must do everything I have commanded her." Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, "We would like to say to you, until we prepare a young goat we would like you to stay until we prepare a young goat for you." Verse 16. The angel of the Lord replied, "Even though you detain me, I will not eat any of your food, but prepare a burnt offering and offer it to the Lord." Manoah did not realize that it was the angel of the Lord. Verse 17. Then Manoah inquired of the angel of the Lord, "What is your name, so that we may honor you when your word comes true?" He replied, "Why do you ask my name? It's beyond understanding." Then Manoah took a young goat, together with the grain offering, and sacrificed it on a rock to the Lord. And the Lord did amazing things while Manoah and his wife watched. The flame blazed up from the altar toward heaven, and the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Seeing this, Manoah and his wife fell on their faces to the ground. When the angel of the Lord did not show himself again to Manoah and his wife, Manoah realized that it was the angel of the Lord. "We are doomed to die," he said to his wife. "We have seen God." Verse 23. But his wife answered, "If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and grain from our hands, nor shown us these things, or now told us this." Verse 24. The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahanan Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. Chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah, and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife." Verse 3. His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among your people, our people?" She said, "You must," she didn't say. "You must go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." Verse 4. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For that time they were ruling over Israel. Verse 5. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring towards them. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he neither told his father or his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Verse 8. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. And he scooped out the honey with his hands, and he ate it as he went along. And when he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from a lion's carcass. Verse 10. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast, as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. Verse 12. "Let me tell you a riddle," Samson said to them. "If you can give me the answer within 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." "Tell us your riddle," they said. "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater something to eat. out of the strong something sweet. For 3 days they could not give the answer. On the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property?" Verse 16. Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You really don't love me. You have given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." I haven't explained it to my father or mother," he replied. "So why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So the 7th day, and finally he told her, because she continued to press him. She, in turn, explained the riddle to her people. Before the sunset of the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey and stronger than a lion?" Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Verse 19. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 of their men, and stripped them of everything, and he gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home, and Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. Chapter 15. Later on, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to his wife, and he said, "I am going to my wife's room." But her father would not let him go in. "I was so sure you hated her," he said, "that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. And then he fastened a torch to every pair of tails, and he lit the torches and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines, and he burned up the shocks and standing grain, together with the vineyards and olive groves. Verse 6. That when the Philistines asked, "Who did this?" they were told, "Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his companion." So the Philistines went up and burned her father to death. Samson said to them, "Since you have acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. He went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. Verse 9. The Philistines went up and camped in Judah, spreading out near Lehi. The people of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" "We have come to take Samson prisoner." They answered, "Do to him as he did to us." Then 300,000 men from Judah went down into the cave, into the rock of Etam, and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." They said to him, "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Samson said, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." "Agreed," they answered. "We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes, and they let him up from the rock as he approached Lehi. The Philistines came toward him, shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and the ropes in his arms became like charred flax. The bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone from a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men. When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone and and the place was called Ramah Lehi, because he was very thirsty. He cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And then God opened up a hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. And then Samson drank, and his strength returned, and he revived. So the spring is called En Hakori, and it is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Chapter 16. One day Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told, "Samson is here." So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night in the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, "At dawn we will kill him." But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night, and then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the 2 posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Verse 4. Sometime later he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him, so that we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength, and how you can be tied up and subdued." Verse 7. Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I will become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried. So she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Verse 10. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now and tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I will become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them, and then with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Verse 13. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you've been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. And she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He woke up from his sleep and pulled the pin out of the loom and with the fabric, and then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me, and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. 17. So he told her, "No razor has ever been used on my head, because I have been a Nazarite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." 18. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, Sorry. Verse 18. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. So he began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Verse 20. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as I'll go out I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know the Lord had left him. 21. Then the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow, and after it had been shaved. Verse 23. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste to our land and multiplied our slain." While they were high in spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood among him, the pillars Samson said to the servant who held his hand out, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers and Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached toward the 2 pillars on each side of the temple, which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And then he pushed with all his might and came down with the temple and the rulers, and said, and then all the people in it. Thus he killed many more men when he died than when he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He had led Israel 20 years. Chapter 17. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "Take 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse. I have silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver, and I will give it back to you." Verse 4. So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith, who used them to make an idol, and it was put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living with the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Verse 9. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said. "I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and my father to be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, Now that I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest. Chapter 18. In those days Israel had no king, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, "Go explore the land." So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they turned and asked him, "Who brought you here? And what are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" And he told them what Micah had done for him, and he said, "He has hired me, and I am his priest." Then they said to him, "Please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful." The priest answered them, "Go in peace, your journey has the Lord's approval." Verse 7. So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that people were living in safety, like the Sidonians, at peace and secure, and since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, "How did you find things?" Verse 9. They answered, "Come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land and it's very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take over. When you get there, you will find an unsuspecting people in a spacious land that God has put into our hands, and a land that lacks nothing whatever." Verse 11. Then 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. And this is why the place west of Kiriath Jearim is called Mahanadan to this day. From there, they went to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Verse 14. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, "You know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver. Now you know what to do." So they turned in there and went into the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The five men who had spied out the land and went inside and took the idol and the ephod and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. when the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They answered him, "Be quiet. Don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and a clan in Israel as a priest rather than someone's than just one man's household?" The priest was very pleased, and he took the ephod and the household gods and the idol, and he went along with the people, putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front. They turned away and left. When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. And they shouted after them, and the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What is the matter with you, that you called out your men to fight?" Verse 24. He replied, "You took the gods I made and my priest and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask what is the matter with you?" Verse 25. The Danites answered, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you, that you and your family will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back home. Then they took what Micah had made and his priest, and went to Laish against a people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burned down their city, and there was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anyone else. The city was in a valley near Beth Rehob. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there, and named it Dan, after their ancestor Dan, who was born in Israel. Though the city used to be called Laish, there the Danites set up for themselves the idol. And Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were the priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the land. They continued to use the idol Micah had made. All the time the house of God was in Shiloh. Chapter 19. In those days Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there for 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay. So he remained with him for 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. Verse 5. On the 4th day he got up early and prepared to leave, but the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, and then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward the woman's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him. So he stayed there that night. In the morning of the 5th day, when he arose to go, the woman's father said, "Refresh yourself. Wait until afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. Verse 9. Then the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave. His father-in-law, the woman's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way home." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went towards Jebus, that is, Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. When they were near Jebus, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at the city of the Jebusites and spend the night." Verse 12. His master replied, "No, we won't go into any city where the people are not Israelites. We will go to Gibeah," he said. "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night on one of those places." So they went to the land. So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped and spent the night, and they went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. Verse 16. That evening an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields, and when he looked, he saw the traveler in the city square. The old man asked, "Where are you going, and where did you come from?" He answered, "We are on our way from Bethlehem in Judah to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim where I live. I have been in Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me in for the night. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves and your servants, me, the woman, and the young man with us. We don't need anything." Verse 20. "You're welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply you with whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square." So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys, and after he had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. Verse 22. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men in the city surrounded the house, pounding the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to our house so that we can have sex with him." Verse 23. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile, since this man is my guest. Don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, so you can use them, and do with them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." Verse 25. But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night. At dawn they let her go. At daybreak the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, and fell down at the door and lay there until daylight. 27. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house, and he stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. The man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts, and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine. We must do something. So speak up." That's it for today. That's going to turn into a war. That's exactly what God warned them about before. Well, that's it for day 19. Check back with me tomorrow for for 18. Check back with me tomorrow for 19. God loves you, and I love you too.